Mandalorian Season 1 is an okay TV series, and it's a decent attempt to expand the Star Wars universe to include like a TV show. And it's okay. It's not good, not great, but not really bad at all, and actually kind of has some of the Star Wars vibe that the original trilogy had. The Mandalorian, it stars Pedro Pascal as the eponymous Mandalorian, with some supporting performances by Carl Weathers, Gina Carano as another bounty hunter. No, sorry, Gina Carano is a Republican shock trooper. Carl Weathers is kind of a frenemy bounty hunter, along with Werner Herzog as the client, and who's basically just an ex-Imperial officer, along with Giancarlo Esposito, who plays Moff Gideon and is the ultimate big bad in the series, along with a voice performance by Nick Nolte as this animatronic alien that he meets throughout the film or throughout the series. It's an okay series. It's one of those ones where there's 8 episodes and they have about 4 or 5, I think 5 different directors, with a couple of them directing multiple episodes in there. And you can tell that the varying directors use different techniques or styles, and it kind of causes the series as a whole to be kind of a tonal mess, where each episode kind of bounces and doesn't really flow from the one before it to the one after it. Specifically, like my favorite episode was episode 7, and then it's a more of a darker kind of leaving you with this ambiguous, is it a bad ending, how is it going to play out? And then immediately into episode 8 there's like a lot of humor. For example, like a 7-minute sequence where it's just this annoying like cop style humor, and it doesn't really jive with what they had just showed before, and it kind of lessens that. But it's not terrible. Like I said, it's one of those ones where it's a decent Star Wars attempt to make a series based upon the original trilogy and kind of expand the world a little bit with some characters who you wouldn't normally be able to see. So basically the gist of it is the Mandalorian gets the job and he goes off to procure this bounty, which turns out to be, at the end of the first episode, turns out to be a baby that's 50 years old, and it's of the same species as Yoda, and he kind of sees it and plays with it a little bit, and then that ends the first episode. He then from there goes to the second episode where he takes it back, or tries to take it back, and his ship's attacked by Jawas and it's completely been stripped, so he has to go do like a mission for the Jawas to be able to get the parts back to his ship. And you get to see the little baby use the Force, and it's kind of a cute little moment at the end of the episode when the Mandalorian finally completes it, goes back, and then gets his ship repaired. When the third episode, then from there, he goes and takes the baby back. He's giving him over to the client. He's getting all of his bounty of Beskar steel, which the Mandalorian uses to outfit his armor. He's got a complete armor, a set of armor at this point that's basically impervious to bullets. It can deflect lightsabers and things like that. And you can kind of see that he's starting to kind of realize that he needs to do something about this child. So that's one of the better episodes, because it leads to him finally making a decision that he has to go and save the child, which he does end up rescuing the child and then kind of flees. And then episode 4 is kind of this like episode of the week where he goes off and he hides on like a forest planet and ends up getting roped in helping some locals again. So you kind of see that he's morally kind of ambiguous in what a lot of his motivations are. Sometimes he's the good guy, sometimes he's the bad guy here. He seems to be a really caring person, at least for the child, because he broke the Bounty Hunters Guild laws to rescue the child or not turn him over to Werner Herzog's character. And this is where Gina Carano comes into the series in episode 4, and there's a cool little fight scene between the Mandalorian and her, and you can tell she actually knows what she's doing. She's an ex-fighter, so it kind of plays very well, and some of her acting performances in terms of the physicality of the role plays very well. You can see this is something that she's adapted to, or she's pretty adept at. And the Mandalorian, it's kind of wishy-washy because you can tell it's Pedro Pascal's voice, but not him in the suit, and it kind of plays on you a little bit because some of the Mandalorian's action, he seems to go from being a really good fighter to a bad fighter to not as good a fighter to getting beat up a little bit, then coming to a draw, then coming back. When he fights a whole group of enemies, they shoot him a little bit. He gets knocked around, but he still comes out ahead. And he's okay. He's not great. The voice acting from Pedro Pascal is all right in it. It's nothing to write home about. He's really just playing a voice, and then the stoic movements or the actions of the lone gunfighter here, being the Mandalorian, kind of adds some gravitas or weight to it. Carl Weathers is Carl Weathers, so he's just kind of doing his best, not Apollo Creed stick, not quite, the guy from Predator. He's not quite doing that, but he's okay, and he's so. Well, so episode 4, he ends up having to leave the village that he helps out after possibly thinking he's going to leave the child there, but he can't because the bounty hunter shows up. So then off to episode 5, where he goes off and goes to Tatooine, where he ends up having some damage to his ship, tries to get it repaired, but to get the money, he ends up taking a job with another bounty hunter who goes out, talks to some sand people. They find out that their quarry's across the one of the deserts on Tatooine, and they get attacked by her, but they're able to go around, capture her, and then the Mando has to procure another source of transportation since the speeder bike got blown up. So when he goes off to get the animal that he can walk on, the guy, of course, shoots the bounty because he's going to betray the Mandalorian, and he runs off to capture the child and hold it hostage along with the mechanic that's repairing the Mandalorian ship. The Mandalorian comes back, sees the dead bounty hunter, or shot bounty hunter, and then runs back to the ship where he distracts the young bounty hunter wannabe and kills him, rescuing the child, saving the lady. And then from there, they go off to another, they fly off into the distance, and then it jumps to the 6th episode. Basically what happens is the Mandalorian has to go and meet up with an old friend of his who ends up procuring the Mandalorian service for a job to go break into a prison ship and break somebody out, an old member of his crew. So the Mandalorian's like, oh, okay, well, I'll do this. So he goes off and does this with a couple other bounty hunters, or a couple, scoundrels, whatever you want to call them. They get into the ship, they break out the Twi'lek that they're going there to rescue. The Mandalorian gets betrayed. They throw him in a cell, but he's able to get out of the cell, and then, capture the other people, throw them into a cell, and take the original Twi'lek that they were trying to capture and bring him back to his friend who had originally hired him. Gets the money, hops in the ship, goes to fly off, and then you see that they're actually about to scramble a fighter to go try to shoot down the Mandalorian. But guess what? The little New Republic beacon that was on the only human on the prison ship that one of the other bounty hunter scoundrels killed, he ends up slipping that onto the Twi'lek Mel that didn't notice it, and then the New Republic shows up in some X-Wings, blows them up, and then it cuts to episode 7, which episode 7 is probably my favorite. He gets a phone call from Carl Weathers telling him, hey, you can come back, we'll make a new deal, we can go to the client, we can give the child over. So after Carl Weathers sent the message, Mandalorian goes, meets up with the Nick Nolte voice character, who's reprogrammed a droid IG-11 from earlier, from the first episode, that helped the Mandalorian rescue the child before the Mandalorian shot him in the head because he was trying to kill the child. So this droid has been reprogrammed, and there's a cool little montage scene where the Nick Nolte's character talks about how he had to basically start from scratch, teach the droid all of the motions all over again to make it become more docile in terms of completing its main mission parameters, which now is to protect and serve, basically kind of like a nanny droid. So they're like, oh, okay, once they have the Gina Carano character, they then decide to leave, go meet up with Carl Weathers, and from meeting up with Carl Weathers, they go off before they get attacked by some flying Minox, and then Carl Weathers gets injured. The little baby walks over, puts that hand on him, uses the force to heal him, heals up Carl Weathers a little bit, and then Carl Weathers, boom, boom, shoots his associates that he came with, revealing that he originally planned to double cross the Mandalorian. The Mandalorian's like, wow, thank you. He doesn't really say that, but he's like, oh, okay. And then they decide to go to the client. They get there to the client, and it's kind of a little tense moment because he told him there's only going to be a couple stormtroopers. Now there's a whole bunch of stormtroopers there, and they're just sitting there kind of like, what are we going to do? How are we going to get out of this? Before all of a sudden, Moff Gideon, Giancarlo Esposito, he shows up, and what does he do? Has all of his men shoot through the building, killing the client and all of his men, leaving Carl Weathers, the Mandalorian, and Gina in there, basically to fend for themselves. While Moff Gideon sends his couple more scout troopers out after hearing a transmission between the Mandalorian and Nick Nolte's character. They send these scout troopers out and they run over there, they kill the guy, steal the little baby. So this is probably my favorite episode. It's the one that's most complete in terms of a story, like having it set up, build up, and then a resolution that pays off after a decent climax, or at least an action piece. Well, the tone here leaves you like really like downtrodden and not very hopeful. And then the 8th episode opens with this like little cop style scene, 2 stormtroopers just shooting the shit on the speeder bikes, and it's not funny. It's very hand-fisted. It's in your face. A lot of the jokes are kind of like ha ha ha. Like there's multiple references to stormtroopers not being able to do stuff, so neither one of them can shoot very good. And then, thankfully, the IG-11 droid shows up, boom, kills the stormtroopers, rescues the baby, and goes into good old nursery mode. And, you know, from here, what happens is the IG ends up showing up, helping save the Mandalorian during this little, like, reprieve area where Moff Gideon was trying to get them to come out and surrender instead of having to fight them. He reveals that he knows everything about them, so the Mandalorian is able to basically kind of hold out in this area for a little while. The IG droid shows up and they run out, end up having a big firefight where there's not a lot of good continuity here. You know, everything's blowing up, nobody can shoot, none of your good guys here get hurt or injured. You know, the droid kind of takes a little bit of a licking, but he gets up and keeps on kicking. And then they go into the building, discover they can go down into the sewer system. They do this while the Mandalorian's injured, and the IG droid, because it's a nursery droid now, it can heal him or help heal him. So it kind of helps heal him up. And then we have kind of a scene where they go down to the tunnels, find where the old Mandalorians were hanging out, and you can see all of them are either dead or have escaped this time. There's a little heartfelt moment where the Mandalorian talks to the Mandalorian armorer, who tells him that it is his mission now to take the foundling, which is the child, and find out who his people are and reunite him with his people. Kind of setting the stage for season 2 here, kind of what the Mandalorian's going to be going through before they get on basically like a little raft in the river of lava and kind of ride down that bad boy for a little while before seeing a whole bunch of stormtroopers hanging out the end of the cave or the tunnel or the lava river or whatever it is. And the IG droid sacrifices himself walking through the lava, gets up to him as he's about to die. He can't let himself be captured, so he self-terminates himself, blows up, self-destruction, whatever, kills all of the stormtroopers around while our heroes run out. And it looks like it's going to be fine until Moff Gideon shows up on his TIE fighter, flying through, shooting them. But the Mandalorian had gotten a jetpack made of Beskar steel from the Mandalorian armor, so he puts that bad boy on and flies after him. He's able to catch onto the TIE fighter and basically disable it, making it crash, while our heroes run off into the sunset to do whatever, with the Mandalorian leaving with the child. You see a cutscene with Moff Gideon, Mr. Esposito's character, who's played very menacing and is probably a high point in the season, especially in this last episode, because he actually gets more time in the 8th episode than he did in the 7th episode. But the 7th episode, in my opinion, was better. But it leaves on a good high note with the end with, you know, Mr. Esposito, Moff Gideon basically saying, we're going to come get you, Mandalorian. You got away from me one time, but I'm going to be fine. He cuts his way out of the TIE fighter with like a dark saber, so it's kind of cool. Got some neat visuals there. Makes you wonder what's next. You can tell that the production value of this series is exceptional. All of the episodes are shot very well. A lot of the sets that they built are, you know, they look real, along with the blending of CGI or rear projection. And it's really, really cool how they filmed this. They basically had a big sound stage and basically put like a screen around it and then projected whatever they wanted to on the back of the screen, while the sets were there. So it's a truly a marvel in terms of how they were able to shoot this, because it's almost completely shot indoor in a soundstage, versus location or even like green screen CGI. So they went as practical as they could in terms of the effects, and it pays off for it. Like I said, it kind of varies tonally from episode to episode. It is still basically just the lone gunslinger all the way through, but it doesn't usually work all the time, or it doesn't work that well all the time, with some of the forced humor, or of course like the stale plot points of, you have a mission, you do it, and the next day you have another mission, you do it. So it's not fully standalone episodes, and it's not fully a continuous story all the way through, but it's decent. Like I said, if you like Star Wars, I would recommend giving it a watch. If you didn't like the new Star Wars movies, I recommend giving it a watch, because it is kind of a return to the old days, so to speak, in terms of how the styling and kind of how the other films pan out versus the prequels or the sequel trilogy. So, if you don't like Star Wars, this one ain't going to get you hooked. It's not enough non-standard Star Wars stuff to try to hook you. It is still very much Star Wars in terms of the characters you see, and a lot of the locations and different actions, and kind of the lore and mythology that's kind of discussed throughout the episodes, is very Star Wars-ish. But like I said, if you like that kind of stuff, give it a watch. If not, then it's not really going to be your cup of tea. And I guess I would recommend the series as a whole, because it's decent. It's certainly a little bit more enjoyable than the last couple of Star Wars films, to be honest. Other than that, thank you. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and have a good day.